Today I'm in Tacoma, Washington. I'm parked right outside the box office because I have a ticket to the hottest show in town. It's new American muscle. It's the V versions of your favorite Cadillac EVs. Over here is the Lyriq V, over here is the Optiq V. Both of these packing a lot of power, a lot of performance, and all the style you would expect from a Cadillac. The question is, which one is the right one for you? I'll try not to have a favorite, at least here at the beginning, but we'll start with the Lyriq V because this is the one that's going to be available on sale first. And it's the first EV that we got from Cadillac, and it's done very well. And it carries that Cadillac design forward in a really cool way, much more of a wagon style than we find in some other crossovers, and I'm definitely a fan of that. But when we go over to the V model, what we're getting is more performance. That means more power, more torque, and a quicker 0 to 60 time, 615 horsepower, 650 pound-feet of torque, and 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds. But it's not the only show on the road here that comes in with quite a punch. This one, though, a little bit smaller. And that kind of makes sense because the Optiq itself is a whole class smaller than we get over in the Lyriq. 519 horsepower, still that 650 pound-feet of torque, and a 0 to 60 time within just a hair. We're 0.2 ahead. This one rated for 3.5 seconds 0 to 60. Again, it's not as much power, but it is a little bit smaller. And that's, I think, where most people are going to be deciding which one fits best for them because it's going to be about the literal fit. Which one of these is going to work for your daily life? Let's take a closer look over at the Lyriq first, and then we'll swing back over to the Optiq. Between the two, the Lyriq is certainly the larger one, but neither of them are particularly small, and they're both on the wide side. But because this hood comes down a little bit lower than we find in the Optiq, it just sort of accentuates that width. But I really like how Cadillac has built the shield design in, especially seamlessly integrating that shield logo into what is obviously not a grille. But they lean heavily into those headlight designs. You can see here we have the strong vertical light bar that we get for our daytime running lights. We also are going to have those individual LED light symbols. The thing is, when we move around back, it does sort of help stretch out the vehicle. And again, this is not particularly small. Wide, yes, but also pretty long. It's about as long as you can get in some three-row vehicles, not all three-row SUVs on the EV side, but a few three rows out there, but it does it in a very stylish way. To me, this screams wagon, but it's not bland. You have our light pipe here that comes all the way down. It's not actually going to be lit the entire way, or not lit really strongly from the side, but it helps create not just a floating roof, but this whole other design element that we just don't see in a lot of other vehicles. But it doesn't completely take away from how much room we get here in the cargo area, because no, it doesn't come all the way back here. It is still very style forward. But if we open this trunk up, which you do so from that Cadillac logo, you can see there is a lot of usable space. And it's space not just in terms of volume, but it's gonna be easy to load things in and out of. So if this is larger and we're leaning towards practicality, well, 28 cubic feet of storage room is going to be plenty for your everyday use, and it's pretty easy to use this space as well. It's got a nice cargo cover where you could put most luggages in, obviously not your very, very tallest one, but you could lay those down and have it covered up nice and easily. We also have the ability to fold down that second row and get just about 60 cubic feet of space, and because those fold pretty flat, that means a lot of large items can fit in here. It's actually going to be more square up there than it is back here, so you'll never run out of space if you're loading things in from that direction. You'll always know where your cutoff is. But it doesn't mean that the Optiq over there doesn't have any cargo capacity or daily functionality. It does come in sort of a different package. And if you look just from this angle here, it's a lot less steep of a drop off. It's a little bit more squared out, but it also has a little bit more flair. Where we did get a little bit of a rear spoiler there on the Lyriq, what we have here is a very bold, what looks like gloss carbon fiber duckbill that is going to be accentuated by the standard spoiler, and this is going to be a little bit more loud. And if loud is not what you're looking for, then maybe this is something that can be deleted. At this point, I'm not sure. But let's go ahead and open this up because, as I mentioned, it's not like it has no storage capacity. We still have 26 cubic feet, but the space here is a little bit different. It's much more square, a lot less spread out. But the only time this is going to be an issue is, I think, if you have a very specific item or a very specific use case that you need that stretched out space and not something as square. Actually, I think this might be a little bit more usable. You won't be able to put all of your luggages in totally upright, but you should still be able to lay them down. And just like we had over in the Lyriq, I know I didn't open up earlier, we do have a little bit of space here. But admittedly, this little cargo cubby that we find in the Optiq is not quite as big as we got over there in the Lyriq. So that's room for your stuff. What about room for you? Well, let's start on the smaller one this time, because small isn't really what I would call this. Neither of these are going to be subcompact vehicles, and at 6 feet tall, I fit in here pretty comfortably. Now, if you do need to make changes, those controls are there on the door. That is going to be a Cadillac feature, not something you find in every mainstream model, but there's plenty of room, and both of these are going to have very large glass ceilings, which is actually just going to give you a little bit more space. They also both have a lot of speakers and Dolby Atmos, but as I sit in here, I've got plenty of room. But what about other people in the car? Let me go ahead and hop in the back. Now this seat is pushed a little bit farther backwards than I probably would put it. I'll slide it forward there for just a second. And let's see how much room we have in the rear. Because what I do usually run into is some headroom issues when I hop in the back of a car. And in this case, unfortunately, that is still the case. Let me go ahead and slide on over here so it's a little bit easier to see. Again, I end up sitting pretty tall, and unfortunately I am here in the ceiling, but I suspect it's going to be pretty similar over there on the bigger model. The solution here would just be to slightly reposition myself, and since we do have a fold down armrest, I can do this without issue and actually fit pretty comfortably. The seats themselves though, quite comfortable, and I love the accenting color in here. We have a very vibrant blue. I'd call it sort of a cobalt blue with a hint of purple in it, and one thing I absolutely love here is these blue seat belts. Now, I didn't expect there to be issues in the Optiq, likely not the same in the Lyriq, though the front seat was never going to be a big concern. This one isn't fully adjusted to myself. It does feel like a bit of an elevated experience. We're not getting the blue accents throughout. We have a little bit more, I guess, metallic finish, which not a bad thing, especially when you look there in the door. But as far as the seat itself, nice and comfortable, plenty of room. In this case, I have that sunroof closed, but this is a really nice space to be, and both of them have this 33-inch display, which means that all of your information is there and available. It is just going to take a little bit of time to figure out where all of those features are. Now, this is running a Google operating system, not Android Auto and not Apple CarPlay available, unfortunately, but the big ticker here is actually going to be this V button, not just that V logo, but that V button is the one that makes everything go, but I'll cover that in just a second. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pull this seat just a little bit forward upright, something closer to what I'd be sitting in, and hop in like I am that passenger in the rear. And as I mentioned, that headroom tends to be a bit of an issue, and I expect similar things here. If I sit bolt upright, well, again, let me go ahead and slide on over. I've got a couple things in here, excuse my mess. But if I slide on over here, the good news and bad news is it's the exact same situation. This is something we get in a lot of vehicles these days because they're leaning really into the style forward design instead of all the function. It's something we expect in EVs as well because that floor ends up being a little bit thicker, which means that you sit up a little bit higher. But most people my height don't end up running out of this sort of headroom. So that'd be something I say, go ahead and check and make sure it works for you. But same thing we had over there in the Optiq, just go ahead and lean over a little bit and that would solve my problem. Although if these are my vehicles, I hopefully am the one driving. But you may also notice that things are a little bit darker in here. We don't have the same splash of color that we got over there, and I actually kind of miss it at this point. Maybe a little more mature, maybe a little bit more put together. I also have a little bit more control back here. I do have a third zone of climate control, but I actually miss a little bit of the fun that we had over there in the Optiq. There are pros and cons to going first, and the Lyriq V here is the one that's going to arrive sooner. But one of the disadvantages is that it's still using that old connector. So we have the J1772 and the CCS combo plug. They are also located on the driver front quarter panel. That's not my favorite spot for charging. I'd actually prefer something over there on the passenger side. But both of these doors are going to be powered, nice and easy to open. However, the latecomer, or the slightly later comer, is going to be this Optiq, and even though it has a very different opening door, actually this one is a little bit louder than maybe I would prefer because the other one tucks away nicely. It's going to be a lot simpler once it opens up because this is using the NACS connector. It's the first Cadillac that's going to be using that, what a lot of folks will know as the Tesla plug, and that means that you can go ahead and plug in directly to a supercharger without worrying about any sort of adapters. But it doesn't mean you can't plug in anywhere you want. And I actually think if you're going to switch over to NACS, you need to move the plug location because right now with those Tesla plugs, that's the advantage of being able to go right into a supercharger. But the supercharger is basically on the other side. So if you want to maximize that, you either want to be on the back left or the front right. And in this case, this is neither of those. But you shouldn't have to stop very often because both of these will get nearly 300 miles of driving range. At least that's what they're rated for. On the Lyriqs, we're looking at 285 out of a just over 100 kilowatt hour battery. On the Optiq, we're looking at just over about 85 kilowatt hours, but still rated for about 275 miles. And that means that between these two, the biggest difference, part of that's going to be efficiency. But that also means that this is going to be a little bit lighter, And when it comes to putting your power down to the ground, as I mentioned, this is about 100 horsepower down, but very similar torque. It's going to come down to your wheels and tires. So let's take a quick look at those. This might be the area with the most similarity between these two models, because in the wheel and tire packages, they're both 275 40 series tires coming standard with Summers. In this case though, 21 inches versus 22. And between the styles, I'm not sure I have a strong preference, but if I do, it might be over here. But if you noticed right behind the wheels, you have those brakes. Both of them are using Brembo front brake calipers for a little extra stopping power. The biggest change is going to be over in the Lyriq, because we now have an adaptive suspension over here, and on the Optiq, it's going to be basically one setting, which means that while this is going to be more variable, this one's going to be fixed. But if that fixed design works for you, then this isn't going to be a problem. And actually, the bigger problem between these two models, I really think comes down to more about pricing than it does almost anything else. Between the two, there's about a $10,000 price delta. Just under $80,000 before destination and just under $70,000 before destination. And between the two, we're really going tit for tat on which one really makes the most sense for you. I think the biggest differential is in the horsepower rating, but I don't see that when it comes to the performance, because yes, it's about 100 horsepower less, but 0.20 to 60 is small, not insignificant, but pretty small. And the question is, how often are you going to use that? And for either of them, you have to jump in to the V mode and activate Velocity Max, even have that power available. I've tried to keep my personal opinion out of it, but honestly, between the two, I'm leaning towards that Optiq V. But I haven't had any time behind the wheel yet, and that's something that I'm very much looking forward to, because I expect this to feel a little bit more agile, and this one probably a little bit more premium. But how do they both fare? Well, that's something that we'll have to wait until we can get both of them at our offices and see if we can try and do a side-by-side. That one's going to be tough, but don't worry, we will go ahead and try for it. Red or blue, let me know down in the comment section below. Do you want the bigger brother or the little sibling, the scrappier one or the brawnier option? Either way, there are some great Cadillacs available. They're coming with the V badge, and if you don't like it, unfortunately, I think that's here to stay. And we should see some more Vs in other Cadillac EV models, but I think these are pretty good ones to start out with.